Hi there, students. In this lecture on comparative environmental law, I wish to discuss laws relating to something which is matter of major concern from the context of climate change, or would rather say global climate change, that is pollution. And when it comes to pollution control regime, we have seen that there is a lack of uniformity amongst the countries, especially when the categorization is done on the basis of the level of development that they have achieved or still achieving. So, when it comes to developed countries, their perceptions, their control regime is far more different than that of developing and least developed countries. And several lectures that we had and discussions that we had since the inception of this discourse on environmental law specialization papers, we came across this differentiations. Now, when it comes to this comparative pollution laws with respect to this entire discourse on comparative environmental law, I wish to discuss the environmental laws of certain countries, to be very specific with respect to pollution control regime. And I'll start with China, and thereafter, in subsequent lectures, I'll also touch upon some other countries and their pollution control regimes, pollution control legal regime, to be very specific. When it comes to China, in 1979, after 5 years from the Stockholm Conference, China adopted a legislation on trial basis, also known as the Environment Protection Law of 1979. However, this legislation was formally promulgated in 1989, but initially, this framework Environment Protection Law of 1979 is the one which China had. And subsequently, several such regulations, standards were promulgated and passed by the Chinese administration or government from time to time for addressing several matters relating to environmental protection. When it comes to pollution control regime, air pollution is a major concern for China. I believe you are already aware that when it comes to PRC, so-called People's Republic of China, the major source of environment pollution in their country is so-called air pollution is because of coal burning and industrial emissions. These are the major sources. Along with that, the other sources are of course sulfur dioxide and suspended particulate matters. Because of their rampant industrial activities and several other industrial developmental plans and projects, the atmospheric condition of China degraded in last 1 decade. In fact, when it comes to construction of new industrial facilities, which might have certain impact on the environmental condition of the environment, the element of environment impact assessment has been introduced. And the standards for emission of these atmospheric pollutants, be it with respect to total emission control requirements for several such atmospheric pollutants, that is now regulated. Now, the polluting entities, they are supposed to obtain a prior pollutant discharge permit from the industrial emissions, or even for emissions of certain specific hazardous and toxic atmospheric pollutants. And effective from no, not last year, but in January 1st of 2018, a new so-called designated environmental protection tax has been introduced. It has replaced this previously, frame that they had, that is the pollution discharge fee. So previously they had something called pollution discharge fee. Now it has been replaced, and now there is a new environmental protection tax, and this tax is applicable to specific environmental air pollutants, to be very specific, and but it doesn't include carbon dioxide. So the pollutants which are discharged from industrial establishments, they are of course under subject to this newly designed environmental protection tax. And in addition to that, the pollutants which are usually discharged from motor vehicles or vessels, even which are non-road mobile machinery, they have also certain emission standards to comply with. They should not exceed that. And China has been implementing this vehicle emission standards for quite a long time, and they are usually following the European Union standards on vehicular emissions. And there is something called the China 5 standard, which is there for the light duty vehicles in a similar way that of this Euro 5 standard. So this China 5 is quite equal to that of Euro 5 standard with some deviations that they have. They have adopted the same kind of a frame. There are certain national standards for fuel consumption limits, which has been established for various type of vehicles. And at this point of time, as of as on January 1st of 2016, there were phase four standards for passenger cars. And it is believed that for new vehicles which will be sold in 2020, that will be created that level. And in addition to that, China has also created something called New Energy Vehicle Credit System (NEV) credit system, where this passenger car manufacturers, they will required to earn certain new energy vehicle credits, and this has started from last year. And if you have excess of NEV credits, that may be used to offset an automaker negative corporate average fuel consumption points, and that occurred by exceeding the target that has been set by the state. So this is more like this carbon trading scheme where they have introduced it in order to promote new energy vehicles which are far more environmentally sound, resilient, and efficient. So when it comes to the so-called ministry that they have a particular ministry for that, in order to watch as a watchdog, as monitor all these things. So the Environment Protection Agency is in the central government is the Ministry of Environment Protection. Now, this was previously responsible for prevention and control of air pollution, and it involves several other, greenhouse gas emissions or climate change, etc., etc. Now, in addition to that, there was another such commission known as the National Development and Reform Commission. Now, these greenhouse gas emissions control or climate change, environment management, they were under this particular National Development and Reforms Commission, also known as NDRC. However, in 2018, this Ministry of Ecology and Environment was established, and now the thing is that previously this Ministry of Environment Protection and National Development and Reform Commission, so-called NDRC. So MEP and NDRC, Ministry of Environmental Protection and National Development and Reform Commission, has merged together, and they have been observed under this new ministry called Ministry of Ecology and Environment. And from time to time, the government has recognized that all several national policies and standards with respect to control pollution in China. And air pollution has been a matter of great concern, and they have adopted series of such national measures and policies, including the 5 year action plan, the 5 years plan, sorry, 5 years plan that they have for socioeconomic welfare, that has also been there. Now, there is this something called Air Pollution Prevention and Control Action Plan. You will come across this if you refer that. It was adopted way back in September 2013. So the prime objective of this action plan was to provide guidance for national efforts to control air pollution, not just for current generation, but also for the future generation. This particular action plan is usually ensured that by the state council, which emphasizes on the protection of this atmospheric environment. And this plan kind of recognizes that air pollution is a serious concern in China, and it addresses the problems relating to particulate matters, which are increasing its presence across the environment in China. So the action plan at the same point of time also set out certain quantitative targets for improving the air quality in the entire country. And they have also certain region specific, and there are certain 10 key action areas which kind of looks into these major aspects of air quality management. They have set the target, and like for example, they had set the target that by 2017 the urban concentration of these particulate matters will be decreased by 10% in comparison to that of 2012 figures. Similarly, the concentration of particle matters, which is very much there in Beijing, then the Yangtze River Delta and Pearl River Delta, they will also come down by 25% and 20% respectively, 15% respectively. That these were the targets which were set. In addition to that, the 13th 5 year plan of China, which is from 2016 to 2020, they had this plan for this socioeconomic development, which also contains a very stringent and strong commitments to improve the quality of air and control emissions in China. In fact, this particular action plan formulates certain air quality standards in cities which are very much under the threat of air pollution. And they have also emphasized on establishing a monitoring system to ensure that the environment protection standards for vehicles, watercrafts, all this will all are properly checked. This 5-year action plan of, 5-year plan, once again, 5-year plan 2016-2020 of China also commit to reduce the emissions and ensure certain compliance with respect to emission standards, and at the same point of time promote green and clean energy. When it comes to the laws, regulations, and standards relating to air pollution in China, the Environment Protection Law, which I have mentioned, was first adopted in 1979 on trial basis, but thereafter it was formally promulgated in 1989. And it took around several, almost a decade to realize that the necessity of a stringent legislation, because there are certain health hazards, health impacts, and also certain social losses which was happening because of degrading air quality standards. So there were several revisions which were made, several amendments which were made, and most recently in 2014 and again in 2015, several such changes were made in the Environment Protection Law of 1989. In addition to that, over the period of time, China has passed more than 30 such special laws relating to various areas of environment protection, and there were around 90 administrative regulations and n number of standards with respect to air pollution and environment as a large. And among them, the law relating to prevention and control of air pollution, or commonly known as the air law, is the primary legislation which deals with air pollution. And if you refer to that, which was first adopted in 1987, the air law was adopted in 1987, and there were several revisions which came in the year 2015. And this revised air law which they have now, it also sets a very specific goal for improving the air quality and emphasizes on controlling the air pollution by which are usually caused by the major sources, that is industrial production, motor vehicles, vessels, agricultural activities, and above all, coal burning. In fact, this particular legislation, air law, the revised one, sorry, they have also called for a very comprehensive measure that is to be taken to restrict atmospheric pollutants and greenhouse gases from time to time, which includes particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, volatile organic compounds, etc., etc., even ammonia also at the same point of time. Now, when it comes to the legal provisions associated with the air quality, according to this air law as well as the air protection law, the Environment Protection Agency under a particular state council is assigned with the responsibility to formulate and implement the national environmental quality standards, which also includes air quality standards. There are also several provincial endeavors from the provincial governments. They may establish local standards on the items which are not covered in the national standards, and they can also set stricter limits to improvise on the national standards. So this is something which is very good about the federal structure that they have with respect to environmental protection. So this is a region specific target that they can also adopt from time to time. Some of the ambient air quality standards which is worth mentioning is the GB 3095 2012. This was released by the Ministry of Environment Protection. Back then it was MEP, not the Ecology and Environment, which is the latest one. So back then in MEP adopted this GB 3095 in 2012, and the standard was very much clear that it set out certain mandatory limits for certain primary pollutants such as nitrogen dioxide, then sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, particulate matters, which is of 10 as well as 2.5 microns respectively. And then there's something which set also certain classes of limit values. Also, there's a class 1 standard and class 2 standards. Class 1 standards basically apply to the regions that need special protection, and class 2 standards apply to other areas, including, say, residential, mixed use, industrial, rural areas, etc., etc. They have taken a very scientific approach in adopting the ambient air quality standards. I mean, India has similar kind of a thing, and here we have the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Boards, which take the particular call from time to time, of course, by prior approval of the state government and central government, respectively. Now, in addition to that, Article 32 of the Primary Air Law is very important because that provides the central as well as the local government to take certain measures from time to time to improve the energy infrastructure and also to popularize, clean energy, produce more clean energy, optimize the utilization of coal to be more cleaner and more efficient, and reduce the proportion of coal in primary energy consumption. So, shifting from the conventional to renewable sources of energy. That is the objective of the air law that they have, and it is pretty much clear under Article 32 of the same. As I've mentioned, there is something called pollutant discharge permits, which was there, and now they have environment tax, but they had this pollution discharge permit prior to that. Now they have environment tax, but previously they had this polluting entities which have to certain or obtain a pollutant discharge permit for industrial emissions or for any other hazardous pollutants. And this permit was usually given to them, to these entities which are into manufacturing and who are into the coal burning so heat sources. There were certain detailed rules also which was set out for issuance of such pollutant discharge permits, which was provided by interim measures from time to time. And it was done by the administrative bodies, and there's measures on administration of pollutant discharge permit as it was issued by Ministry of Environment Protection back then in 2016. But now you have a pollution discharge fees and environment protections tax which has replaced it from the year 2018. Now, according to this environment protection tax law, the pollution discharge fee is now replaced, and now you have newly designed environment protection tax. Under this, the entities, they have to directly discharge the pollutants and into the environment, including the air pollutants, water pollutants, etc., etc. But they are subject to certain tax, and that they have clearly specified in a list. So there is a law which is in place now, the Environment Protection Tax Law, and this kind of enlists all the specific air pollutants that are subject to tax. But the carbon dioxide is not subject to tax. This is quite strange. Carbon dioxide is not subject to tax. Well, at the same point of time, you have the Environment Impact Assessment Notification Scheme. If you refer to the air law under Article 18 of the same, there is a clear mentioning of the environment impact assessment and the standard for emissions and with respect to atmospheric pollutants and even for controlling the emissions. They have to comply with the project proponent who is proposing construction project. They have to comply with the environment impact assessment or procedure of China. This is very much clear. So, in addition to that, there are other avenues, especially with respect to vehicular pollution. Now, when it comes to vehicular pollution or vehicular emission standards, GB 1835 2.5, it's not 2.2, it will be 2.5 of 2013. This vehicular emission standard is very important because this is the current emission standard for light duty vehicles, and this was issued by way back by Ministry of Environment Protection only, and of course by there is something called General Administration of Quality Supervision, Inspection and Quarantine, also known as AQSIQ. So the General Administration of Quality Supervision, Inspection and Quarantine, and the Ministry of Environment Protection. They were the one who came up with this emission standard for light duty vehicles, 18352.5 of 2013, also known as China 5, just in the line of Euro 5 standards. They have adopted this. And the objective was that this light vehicles which are sold and registered in China, they have to comply with the standard as specified under that, so-called the China 5 standard. And this is the China 5 standards, which is quite similar to that of the European 5 or Euro 5 standard. So China has issued several such emission standards from time to time for heavy-duty vehicles also, commonly known as the limits and the measurement methods for exhaust pollutants from compression, ignition, or gas fuel positive ignitions, or for gasoline engines, for diesel engines, for motorcycles. From time to time, 2007, 9, 2006, 2008, they have notified all these limits and measurement methods for exhaust pollutants. So depend upon the nature. If it's a heavy duty vehicle which runs on gasoline engines, then it's different. For 2009 will be regulating them. Then for diesel engines, 2006 regulations will be regulating them. For compression ignition and gas fuel positive ignition engines, you will have 2007 And similarly, for motorcycles you have the 2008. So this is something which is there now. But in addition to that, the China energy conservation law is also quite significant, because it was first enacted way back in 1997, and it has again been revised in 2016, because here, according to this law, the state encourages the development and use of, say, new and renewable energy, so called the clean fuels and alternative fuels in transportation. So the relative department, which is under the state council, they can formulate certain standards for fuel consumption limits for vehicles, as well as for vehicles from time to time. And there is something called, this was adopted way back in 2012 for a period of 8 years. From 2012 to 2020, they came up with something called China's Energy Saving and New Energy Vehicle Industry Development Plan. I repeat it again: Energy Saving and New Energy Vehicle Industry Development Plan. This was from 2012 to 2020, which set out certain expected feet average target for fuel consumption, for efficiency. That is something which they have set for energy consumption. So this is something which is there. Now, in addition to that, they have something called corporate average fuel consumption standard. This is commonly known as CAFC. There's phase 4 standards, which includes the CFSC, or the standards for manufacturer or manufacturer of several such, car fleets, etc., etc. They have to set out to the standards. So they have this ministry called Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and there are several other departments which have jointly issued these measures on parallel administration for passenger car, enterprise average fuel consumption, and new energy vehicle credits. So this was issued in 2018. I repeat it again: parallel administration of passenger car, enterprise average fuel consumption, and new energy vehicle credits. In short, new energy vehicle credits, NEV credits. So if you just Google NEV credits, you'll get the details as regards the same. So basically, the NEVs are the measures which include, say, for example, if you want to invest in, say, electric passenger cars or plug-in hybrid vehicles or fuel cell passenger vehicles, you have to go ahead with this parallel administration system of automobile companies, which in fact promotes new energy cars, which promotes all these so-called new kind of a technology. So there they have additional compliance flexibility, of course, to promote this kind of NEV. So the Chinese NEV, in fact, their mandate is quite similar to that of the United States zero emission vehicle mandate. So there is something called California's ZEV, zero emission vehicle standards, or so-called mandate. It's quite similar to that of it. So China's NEV is quite similar to the California zero emission vehicle standards. So these are some of the quite novel, I would rather say, measures which have been taken by the People's Republic of China China's administration from time to time to combat air pollution. So it's quite unique in a way, and I believe when it comes to India, well, we are also quite famous for taking Bharat standards and all these things, which is kind of inspired from the European standards and all. So, but this taxation system, the credit system, even for automobile sectors, there are specific series of regulations even for new energies, new vehicles, new and renewable energy oriented vehicles. They are coming up with that, and I'm pretty sure that India is also coming up with such kind of standards. So, it's a very good lessons to learn from for India from China, I believe, and I do in fact insist you all to refer to these laws and regulations which are there in existence in China with respect to air pollution. So in the next class, I'll look into some other environmental pollution related legal regimes of some other countries. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of your family, stay home, stay safe. Thank you very much.